What happened in this courtroom will restore your faith in justice forever. A dedicated teacher faced losing everything to a predatory bank, but when real estate expert David Clark stepped in, the impossible became reality. The judge's final ruling left the entire courtroom speechless and the bank's lawyers scrambling for answers. If you think the system always wins against regular people, what you're about to witness will change your mind completely. This incredible rescue story proves that strategic intervention can defeat even the most powerful institutions when applied correctly. The shocking truth about how one man destroyed a billion-dollar bank's illegal scheme will leave you absolutely stunned. But what happened next defied every legal expert's prediction and created a victory so incredible that it made national headlines across America. Stay right here because this victory will give you hope when you need it most and show you that no financial crisis is ever truly permanent. Patricia Williams had dedicated 32 years of her life to teaching elementary school children in rural Ohio. At 58 years old, she thought her biggest worry would be planning retirement, not fighting for her home against a billion-dollar bank. But life had other plans that would destroy everything she held dear. When her husband died suddenly from a heart attack, Patricia discovered he had secretly refinanced their home multiple times to cover his gambling debts. The devastation was overwhelming and life-crushing. The bank now claimed she owed $400,000 on a house worth only $200,000. With foreclosure papers in hand, and just 72 hours before the sheriff would arrive, Patricia sat in her empty kitchen crying uncontrollably. The same kitchen where she had graded thousands of papers and prepared lessons that shaped young minds for over 3 decades of dedicated service. Now, it would all be gone forever. Bank refused to negotiate, claiming she had no legal standing despite 35 years of marriage. Their lawyers were ruthless and heartless, dismissing her decades of dedicated service to children and her late husband's deception as completely irrelevant to their case. Patricia had called every lawyer in town, but none would take her case against such a powerful institution with unlimited resources and teams of attorneys. She was completely alone, facing an impossible situation with no money for legal help and nowhere to turn for assistance. The overwhelming stress was literally killing her slowly every single day. She could barely function, couldn't sleep, and felt her world collapsing around her. Her health was deteriorating rapidly. That's when a desperate colleague mentioned David Clark, a real estate consultant who specialized in emergency interventions and impossible cases that others had given up on completely. Patricia was deeply skeptical and had lost all hope completely. How could anyone defeat a bank with unlimited resources and teams of lawyers? But with time running out and nowhere else to turn, she made the call that would change everything forever. Desperate? Don't give up because the incredible rescue you're about to witness will change everything. David Clark arrived at Patricia's modest 2-bedroom home on a gray Tuesday morning, just 60 hours before the scheduled eviction. What he found broke his heart completely. Patricia, once confident and dignified in her classroom, was now a broken shell of herself. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying for weeks. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she poured coffee, and she jumped at every sound, terrified it might be the sheriff coming early. The foreclosure notice was taped to her front door like a scarlet letter, announcing her shame and failure to the entire neighborhood. Children she had taught walked by, pointing and whispering. Patricia explained through tears how her husband, though 35 years, had hidden his devastating gambling addiction, secretly borrowing against their home multiple times without her knowledge or consent. When he died, she not only lost her beloved partner, but discovered crushing debts that seemed absolutely impossible to overcome. The bank claimed she was personally liable for everything, despite having no knowledge of the fraudulent transactions. Her husband had orchestrated behind her back. They had offered her a cruel and heartless choice: pay $400,000 immediately or lose everything and still owe them $200,000. Patricia showed David the threatening letters, the legal documents filled with intimidating language designed to terrify her, and the bank's final merciless demand. She had already sold her car, jewelry, furniture, and everything of value, but barely raised $15,000. The bank laughed at her desperate offer, calling it insulting and pathetic. Their lawyers were preparing to seize the property and sell it at auction, leaving Patricia homeless and still owing a fortune she could never repay in her lifetime. She had contacted multiple legal aid organizations, but they were overwhelmed and couldn't take her case against such a powerful opponent with unlimited resources. Private attorneys wanted $50,000 up front, money she simply didn't have and couldn't borrow from anyone. Her union representative tried desperately to help, but admitted they had no experience fighting major banks with unlimited resources and teams of lawyers. Patricia felt completely trapped, abandoned by every system that was supposed to protect hardworking people like her, who had dedicated their lives to public service. The overwhelming stress had made her physically ill and emotionally destroyed. She hadn't slept properly in weeks, couldn't eat without getting sick, and had to take medical leave from the teaching job she loved more than anything. Her doctor warned that the stress could trigger a fatal heart attack, just like her husband. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent 3 decades teaching children about fairness, justice, and the American dream, only to discover that neither existed when you faced powerful institutions alone without money or connections. Her neighbors avoided eye contact, embarrassed by her desperate situation and afraid it might be contagious. Former friends stopped calling, uncomfortable with her desperation and fear of losing everything. Patricia felt invisible, forgotten, and completely defeated by a system designed to crush people like her who played by the rules their entire lives. The shame was overwhelming and constant. She had given up all hope when David walked into her kitchen that morning. He listened to her heartbreaking story without judgment, examined every document carefully with expert eyes, and asked detailed questions about the bank's predatory actions. For the first time in months, someone was taking her seriously and treating her like a human being deserving of respect and dignity. Terrified, hit that subscribe button immediately, because David's crisis intervention strategy will leave you absolutely stunned. David Clark had seen predatory lending before during his years as a crisis intervention specialist, but Patricia's case was particularly egregious and criminal. As he reviewed the loan documents with expert eyes, his anger grew with each page. The bank had violated multiple federal regulations, engaged in systematic deceptive practices, and taken deliberate advantage of a grieving widow. But David also saw incredible opportunity hidden within the crisis. He had learned from Robert Kiyosaki that every financial crisis contained powerful leverage points, and this case was absolutely no exception. The bank's arrogance and illegal behavior would become their devastating weakness. David's first move was absolutely brilliant and strategically perfect. Instead of fighting the foreclosure directly like most attorneys would do, he focused laser-sharp attention on the underlying fraud that created the crisis. The bank had processed multiple refinances without proper income verification, blatantly violating truth-in-lending laws. They had also failed to provide required federal disclosures and had actually forged Patricia's signature on several critical documents. David documented every single violation meticulously, building an airtight federal case that could result in massive penalties and criminal charges for the bank. But he needed more time, and Patricia's eviction was still 48 hours away. That's when David implemented his emergency real estate strategy that would shock everyone involved. He contacted a trusted real estate investor friend who specialized in lightning-fast purchases for crisis situations. Within 6 hours, they had crafted a detailed purchase agreement that would buy Patricia's home for $200,000, exactly its current market value. The purchase would happen 30 minutes before the foreclosure auction, giving Patricia enough money to pay off the legitimate debt while preserving every dollar of her equity. But David wasn't finished with his masterful strategy. He simultaneously filed a comprehensive federal complaint against the bank for systematic predatory lending practices, requesting an immediate emergency injunction to stop the foreclosure. The complaint detailed how the bank had systematically targeted vulnerable elderly homeowners with deceptive loan products, using Patricia's case as the primary devastating example. The legal filing was strategic genius that would terrify the bank David knew from experience that banks feared federal investigations more than anything else in the world. Regulatory scrutiny could cost them millions in fines and damage their reputation permanently in the marketplace. Within hours of filing, the bank's lawyers were calling frantically, suddenly interested in negotiating a settlement. But David held firm to his strategy. He had learned from Kiyosaki that negotiation from a position of strength was absolutely everything. The bank needed this case to disappear more than Patricia needed their approval. David's next move was psychological, warfare against the institution. He contacted local news stations with Patricia's heartbreaking story, framing it perfectly as a dedicated teacher versus corporate greed. The media loved the compelling narrative. Beloved educator destroyed by bank deception while trying to educate America's children. The story went viral on social media, generating thousands of supportive comments and sharing Patricia's emergency fundraising page. Public pressure mounted quickly and powerfully. Parents whose children Patricia had taught for decades rallied to support her cause. Local business owners offered generous donations. Even former students, now adults with families, contacted news stations with emotional stories about how Patricia had changed their lives forever. The bank found themselves fighting not just a legal case, but a devastating public relations nightmare. David escalated the pressure further with brilliant real estate thinking. He organized a peaceful protest outside the bank's regional headquarters, where dozens of Patricia's former students and their parents held signs reading, "Save Mrs. Williams" and "Banks versus Teachers." Local politicians joined the demonstration, sensing political advantage in supporting a beloved educator. The bank's stock price actually dropped 2 points as the story spread nationally. Behind the scenes, David was working his real estate magic with incredible results. He had discovered that Patricia's home sat on property that was about to be rezoned for commercial development. The land value would triple within 2 years, making it worth $600,000. David quietly contacted commercial developers, generating multiple purchase offers, significantly above market value. He now had backup plans for his backup plans. The bank's lawyers were growing desperate as pressure mounted. Their client wanted the negative publicity to end immediately. They offered to reduce Patricia's debt to $100,000, thinking it was generous. David countered with a devastating proposal that shocked them. The bank would forgive all debt completely, pay Patricia $50,000 for her suffering, and face no federal investigation. The alternative was a prolonged legal battle, federal scrutiny, and continued negative publicity that would cost millions. The bank's initial response was predictable outrage and threats. They threatened to destroy Patricia completely, promising to pursue her for the full debt amount plus legal fees. David smiled confidently. He had been waiting for this moment. Hope completely restored? Annihilate that like button and don't move because the most unbelievable rescue is happening right now. What happened next can only be described as a miracle of strategic intervention and legal brilliance. David Clark walked into the federal courthouse carrying evidence that would change everything and destroy the bank's case completely. He had spent the previous 48 hours building an absolutely airtight case that would expose the bank's systematic fraud to federal authorities. The evidence was overwhelming and devastating. Forged signatures, fabricated income documents, and a clear pattern of targeting vulnerable elderly homeowners across multiple states. But David's masterstroke was discovering that Patricia's case was actually part of a massive criminal conspiracy. The bank had defrauded hundreds of families using identical illegal methods, creating a massive federal crime that would result in criminal charges. David presented this explosive evidence to a federal prosecutor who had been investigating the bank for years. Within hours, federal agents were seizing bank records and interviewing terrified executives. The bank's lawyers went into full panic mode, calling David every 30 minutes with increasingly desperate settlement offers. They started at complete debt forgiveness, quickly escalated to $50,000 compensation, then $100,000. David kept refusing their offers, knowing their fear was growing exponentially with each news cycle. The morning of Patricia's scheduled eviction, everything exploded into chaos. Federal agents raided the bank's headquarters, seizing computers and arresting 2 executives in handcuffs. The news cameras captured handcuffed bank officials being led away in shame while employees watched in horror. Patricia watched from her kitchen, tears streaming down her face as justice finally arrived after months of suffering. But the incredible rescue was just beginning to unfold. The federal prosecutor called David with absolutely shocking news. Patricia's case had triggered a full criminal investigation that would likely result in a $100 million settlement fund for all victims. Patricia wouldn't just keep her home, she would receive substantial compensation for her suffering and trauma. The bank's board of directors held an emergency meeting and fired their entire legal team. Their new lawyers contacted David within hours, offering complete debt forgiveness, $200,000 compensation, and a written apology. They begged him to accept before federal charges were filed. David presented the incredible offer to Patricia, but added his own powerful condition. The bank would establish $1 million fund to support teachers facing similar crises. Patricia signed the agreement that afternoon, officially ending her nightmare and beginning her new life of hope. The transformation was immediate and absolutely incredible. Patricia went from facing homelessness to owning her home debt-free with $200,000 in the bank. But more importantly, her confidence and dignity were completely restored. She returned to teaching with renewed passion, knowing she had survived the worst and emerged victorious. The bank quietly settled with dozens of other families, paying millions in compensation while implementing new policies to prevent future predatory lending. Patricia's case became a landmark victory that protected countless families from similar abuse. The local newspaper ran a front-page story about Patricia's victory, calling it the triumph of good over greed. Her students welcomed her back with handmade cards and flowers, celebrating their beloved teacher's incredible rescue. Patricia framed David's business card and kept it on her desk, a reminder that strategic intervention could overcome any crisis. But the most powerful, life-defining lesson that will determine whether you survive your own crisis is what I'm about to reveal. The most important lesson from Patricia's incredible rescue isn't about fighting banks or complex legal strategies. It's about recognizing that no financial crisis is permanent when you have the right knowledge and strategic support. Patricia's victory happened because she refused to accept defeat and found someone who understood that every crisis contains hidden opportunities for those who know where to look and take action. Next week, I'll share another incredible rescue story about a military veteran who lost everything to medical debt, but discovered a real estate strategy that not only saved his family, but created generational wealth. You won't believe how one conversation changed everything. If Patricia's story gave you hope, I need you to take action right now. First, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell because I share these life-changing rescue stories every week, and you don't want to miss the strategies that could save your family. These aren't just stories, they're proof that solutions exist even in the darkest moments. Second, destroy that like button if you believe that good people like Patricia deserve justice, and that strategic intervention can defeat even the most powerful institutions. Your like tells YouTube to share this hope with other families who desperately need to see that rescue is possible. Third, share this video with anyone you know who's facing foreclosure, overwhelming debt, or feels trapped by the system. Patricia's victory proves that no situation is hopeless when you have the right knowledge and support. Your share could literally save someone's home and family. Fourth, tell me in the comments about your own financial challenges or victories. This community is about supporting each other and sharing strategies that work. Patricia read comments from previous videos that gave her courage to keep fighting. Your story could inspire someone else's breakthrough. Finally, if these rescue stories help you sleep better at night knowing that solutions exist, consider supporting this channel so I can continue finding and sharing these incredible transformations. Every subscription, like, and share helps me reach more families who need hope and practical strategies for overcoming crisis. Remember, your real estate empire starts with your next decision. Make it count.